Hey everyone. There's a, I'll say, problem overall in the competitive scene, in my opinion, with regards to new maps. And I just kind of wanted to talk about it, talk about different people's mindsets and outlooks and preferences towards playing new maps. So yeah, we are here on a Villa demo. I was looking for a Reckoner one, but did not find one. But anyway, did that pipe just bounce off of my scout? That looked weird. Anyway, yeah, I don't want to just bury the lead, I suppose. I think that overall, Sixes players as a community tend to be very close-minded about new maps. Or rather, that I think there isn't a lot of objective thinking necessarily. So this isn't really meant to be an argument in favor of new maps necessarily, but just kind of highlighting some of the thoughts and opinions on new maps. So yeah, I guess for an overview, for starters, most of the maps that are played consistently in Sixes, and of course different regions are different about this. For example, Oz Fortress will play new maps a lot, like Logjam, Manbase, Reckoner have all been played in Oz Fortress seasons. ETF2L, of course. I mean, all the different regions have different map pools. Reckoner is relatively new to North America, but has been kind of a staple map of Europe for a little bit. I don't know if they still play it at the present moment. But yeah, maps come and go. And for any given season, you can find any number of people who this is not good phrasing. You can find someone whose least favorite map is any single map, right? For me, it's Product. And I'm starting to really not like Snakewater either. It's a little bit boring. But basically, any single map. I mean, Process has been suggested about taking out. People hate Gully Wash. People have talked about taking out... Well, Metalworks has been removed for a season, or given like a season break recently. It should be returning. Everyone wants to return to Granary and Badlands, as if there wasn't, strong reasons why we stopped playing those maps. So yeah. This is not unique to new maps, and any map you will find people who don't like them. However, what is unique in the case of new maps, in my opinion, is that valid criticism, because again, a lot of criticism towards new maps and their flaws are valid, because I think every map has some flaws. There is no perfect map. Honestly, maybe Sunshine is perfect. Or at least there's no glaring issues. I really like Gullies. But again, it's just all opinion. So, since every map is going to have flaws, of course, new maps are going to have flaws as well. And, of course, it's, the job of the mapper to be hearing out this feedback and making adjustments to change the gameplay and whatnot in order to kind of smooth these bumps out. And that is a process that all these maps have gone through. However, in the case of new maps, the valid criticism is treated as a deal breaker and just a non-starter for this map to be considered. When staple maps that we play and enjoy, and like Pug staple maps, the stuff that people are going out of their way to play for just regular games, have similar flaws. But in those cases, it's kind of just a downside of the map that's overall still positive. I can think of some good examples here. So, I mean, one such example is on Villa. The big complaint for a long time was about the mid to second stalemate. Or rather, just pressuring into second from mid. It was... I don't even remember what the criticism was at the time. I think it may have been that it was too difficult. Which I do think that the current version is pretty decently balanced. But in any case, sure, valid criticism. However, or maybe... No, we'll continue with that. Valid criticism, sure. But on that hand, like, I don't know, is Gully Wash that much easier to pressure into. Or if we want to talk a different point, like, Snakewater Last is one of the most awful points to try and sack into in the game, in my opinion. And, I mean, people still play Snakewater. And when I say Snakewater, I'm starting to just not like it a lot. There's a lot of really good things I like about Snakewater, but, I don't know, overall the map just sometimes feels a little stale, and sometimes a little uninteresting. But I don't know, Villa has a lot of cool things to offer. I like the mid, I like the last, and even, again, the second feels fine to me as well. So, again, I guess just reiterating the point that when it comes to new maps and stuff that people aren't familiar with, these issues, which, again, are valid criticisms, are kind of treated as non-starters. Oh, the example I should bring up is Sultry. Sultry Last gets talked about as, like, impossible to do anything into. Which, again, you know, you can make that valid criticism. If the other team has a sniper, then what do you do at all, right? I guess you just have to identify what side the sniper's on and go to the other. Because you can't pressure left against the sniper, and you can't pressure right against the sniper. The sniper can only be on one side, I guess. So it just can feel very, very difficult to do much. And I don't think it's that much of a surprise that the Sap and Sack started seeing more use as Sultry started getting played in Invite. Like, valid criticism. However, is it any harder to pressure into against a sniper than Sunshine, where you just can't peek top right, and you know, the normal pressure door you would maybe even take space through left side is just not an option at all because the sniper's watching it? I don't think so. So, again, in the case of Sultry, no one... Well, I think people do like Sultry overall. But in the case of some of these new maps, these are treated as non-starters. And the people who just don't want to play Sultry at all do mention the last as, like, oh, like, the map's cool and all, but, yeah, no, the last is, like, too difficult, so it's a bad map. Well, I mean, that's an unfair characterization. I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but, you know, they don't want to play it. But, again, in these other maps, those same flaws exist. So, why in the case of the new map is it... what's the word I'm looking for? I've already used non-starter and I've already used deal breaker. I feel like there's another word to... another synonym I can be using. Anyway, yeah, in the case of these new maps, it's just... it makes them not worth playing, but in the old maps, it's fine. People have found strategies or whatnot. And that is kind of the whole thing, is people have strategies for these old maps. And particularly, they just have experience on these old maps. And that is the big difference maker, is when you're actually used to a map, it becomes a much smoother experience to play, rather than playing on a new map that you're not experienced on. And experience comes into play multiple times. Well, all the time when playing sixes. And map experience is a big deal. So one example I can think of, if I am playing demo and I am playing on process second and I'm holding my own second and the other team just sacks a soldier and it's my turn to pressure back and counter sack into mid, I know that I can peek choke, spam over the rock onto point and get damage on their medic, because that's where medics like to stand, and I just kind of am familiar with that spam angle. However, in the case of Reckoner, if I'm playing a Reckoner mid and the other team is playing behind their crate, do I really key into the fact that, oh, I can just shoot over this and hit everyone the exact same way that I would in other situations on maps I'm familiar with? Because you can, absolutely, but you might not be as keyed into that as you would be otherwise. And I think that experience is a big deal and makes playing a map smoother as you figure out those sort of just micro strategies, I guess I'll call them. But also just decision making is much smoother. When you've already pushed through the same 3 doors 100 times, you really start to figure out which situations favor which door. And especially, like, as a team who has pushed multiple... As a team who's familiar with all that stuff, it's going to be much smoother. The transitions are going to be much faster. You're going to maneuver around the map a lot easier. Versus on a newer map, for a little bit, as you get used to it, there's going to be a little bit of disconnect. It's like, okay, which door do we go? And sometimes you might just pick a door that doesn't really make that much fundamental sense and get punished for it. And then it just feels bad. So, yeah. You definitely have a higher level of gameplay when people are experienced with a map. But I don't think that new maps are particularly disadvantaged in this sense. Or at least they are, but they don't have to be. Because in my opinion, new maps really, really favor people with strong fundamentals. So, in the example of, let's say, pushing into Snakewater second with 2 picks, it makes a lot of sense to push lower because you have picks. You're expecting to maybe get through without using Uber. You don't want to give the other team an exchange because if they can take an exchange and prevent you from getting through a door, i.e. prevent you from getting through Saw, because that's really the only other door, then they might be able to buy time for their spawners or at least put up a fight on second. Versus if you guys get through and take positioning and take the fight while they're still down 2, there's not really much they can do. They can take the exchange and leave, but yeah, they're kind of screwed. So it makes a lot of intuitive sense to dry push Snakewater lower. Because you get a lot of space and yard, you get to spot bombs. If the other team stays on point to try and bait that exchange, then they're quite vulnerable to your bombs. So there's a lot of fundamental reasons why this dry push makes a lot of sense in a situation like that. But for some people, they were only taught, oh, if you have like picks or something, you're trying to dry push, just go lower, because that's the dry push door. Which is true, but that is knowledge that only applies to Snakewater too. Versus, if you apply all the fundamentals I just talked about, then similar principles and similar patterns will show themselves on other maps. Of just the absolute basic stuff of, if you're trying to dry push a point with Uber add, then a good door to dry push is the one that's furthest away from where the other combo is standing. Or if you're trying to pop through a door and maybe catch some players, then you're going to want to pop through the door that's closest to where the other combo is standing. These are just basic fundamental principles that apply almost, I'll say almost universally, because of course I'm sure different maps have different quirks I can't really think of at the moment. But yeah, it's just the basic principles that you can carry over on new maps. I tend to thrive on new maps as a demo, generally speaking. Of course, you know, yeah, you have your good games and your bad. But I don't feel that disconnect for new maps as strongly as a personal, like as an individual player. Just because I like to think of demo as a class in like the fundamental aspects, right? So sure, there are things that I will miss on new maps when holding a choke. Maybe I stand in the wrong place, or there's a trap that I could be putting to be more effective or something, or I'm just doing things in the micro sense that make me less effective at my role. But the macro things of holding a choke, rotating doors, rotating spam, shooting high ground, all of these still apply equally on all these maps. And I think when you think about the fundamentals and approach it from a fundamental standpoint, these new maps are actually perfectly serviceable, if not offering unique gameplay that makes them interesting. So overall, while, again, there's a lot of preference, and there's new maps that I don't like. I'm not a fan of man-based, for example, because the map just feels like 30% larger than it should. And there's absolutely things that I don't necessarily enjoy in new maps. Overall, though, I quite like them. I like Reckoner. I like Villa. I think that new maps are quite nice. And maybe another map, a new map that I'm iffy on as well as Clear Cut. I used to like it a lot, but it can be very difficult to pressure the point and flip the cap, which I think is an interesting dynamic in Koth, and Bagel does it quite well, for instance. But anyway, point I'm making is that, yes, there is a generally dismissive attitude towards new maps, but it's not completely unfounded, and there is... Well, not only do really any maps have legitimate criticisms. But there's also... the gameplay is going to be a little bit different if you're not experienced with the map. And especially if you only learn through kind of memorizing the holds and what you should do and flowchart stuff. Then yeah, it's gonna feel a lot worse and a lot more jarring than if you kind of focus more on the fundamental essences of what makes different holds and different pushes and different strategies solid concrete options. So anyway, new maps are interesting, and again, they're an ongoing process as well. Like, maps get tweaked all the time to feedback, and yeah, hopefully, I'd like to see people generally more more welcoming of new maps, I think, because I do think there's a lot of value. I mean, like, Sultry is a great map. I think, like, Sultry and Reckoner are... oh, what is going on with the demo? Am I, like, lagging out? Or is this a pause? I don't think it's a pause. Anyway, like, a map like Sultry and Reckoner, I'd rather play that than Process, Snakewater. Like, there's a lot of maps I'd rather play those than. But again, it's opinion at the end of the day. And yeah, I don't think I have anything else to talk about. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later.